I just got thrust into it, and I was trying to figure out what was going on. So I'd say it was a great introduction to the area because I fell in love with the language and the culture. And then I spent the next 20 years through now trying to figure out why is China the way it is, what's happened, and how is China interacting with the rest of the world.
Hello, and welcome to Fireside with VC. My name is Andrew Romans, and today we're with Jonathan Bench, who's a partner at Harris Bricken law firm. He's based in Utah, but he has a lot of experience in working with China, and at one point of his life lived in China for a number of years. And so today we're going to talk about the changing dynamics of doing business in China or doing business with Chinese, and what that means for startups, and ultimately what that means for VCs that are supporting startups. So a lot has changed. So we're going to get kind of an update from an insider expert. Jonathan, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Happy to be here.
So maybe give us a quick background of your, personal business connection to the region, and then what your area of business has been since those days.
Great. So I spent about 3 years in China in the early heydays of China. I was a young 19, 20, 21, 22. So in the middle of my undergrad, before I had any real world experience, I was thrust into this time, 2 years in Hong Kong, a year in Sichuan province. And so I was seeing things through very new eyes, kind of understanding the world as it existed then, not understanding that China was on the rise, but not really knowing, with a professional business brain like I have now, what I was seeing. I was seeing development, and China was at various stages of development, depending on where you were, whether you were in a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 city. And so
what city were you in? I mean, I love Hong Kong. What was the mainland China city you were in?
Mainland China, it was a tier 3 city named Deyang. Deyang was the third largest city in Sichuan province. So
what's the biggest city in Sichuan province?
Chengdu. Chengdu is the capital.
Oh, Chengdu.
So, yeah.
Oh,
right.
yeah. Oh, so you're way over there. I've been to Chengdu. That's like the Midwest.
It is. It's like the
you can think of it as like the Midwest, where they make automotive. Like that's been declared the automotive capital. Yeah, Chengdu is a crazy big city.
Right. And they pulled, in the early 2000s, they started the plan to pull Chongqing out of Sichuan province. So Chongqing is a self-contained.
I love that. That is my favorite city in all of China.
Is it?
Chongqing is my favorite. They've got that that pepper that if you had a mirror to see yourself, you would think that your face is like shaking like that, when in fact it's not.
Yeah, they call that mala. It's the numbing spice. So it's not, they have 5 different types of spices in Chinese lingo, and Sichuan is the pinnacle of that. So mala is the name for that, and it's the numbing spice. Yeah, exactly.
Well, Chongqing is just a beautiful city with those mountains that you think like don't exist on Earth, and floating down those 2 rivers there. Just a beautiful place. If I were to live in China, that is my favorite place. I mean, you could say Shanghai is just a great town. It's like a New York, and Hong Kong is the coolest. It's like a Paris. But anyway, if I were on mainland, I would do that. Okay. Sorry to interrupt.
That's fine. So tier 3 city, it was, probably a cool 10, 15 million. It still felt very rural at the time. And I was teaching at a technical college, teaching English, learning Mandarin after I'd learned Cantonese in Hong Kong, and trying to figure out what I was seeing, understanding the world there. So that was my foray. And I was working with a lot of younger students who are now mid-level managers all over the country. But these were not the creme de la creme. These were kids from poorer rural areas. Didn't even really have an interest in learning English, but they were, we were a novelty. My wife and I were teaching there together. And so we were a novelty. So my exposure to China was very unusual because I didn't prepare to go. I just got thrust into it. And I was trying to figure out what was going on. So I'd say it was a great introduction to the area because I fell in love with the language and the culture. And then I spent the next 20 years through now trying to figure out why is China the way it is, what's happened, and how is China interacting with the rest of the world.
Okay. And I mean, with my own experience, I pretty much gave up on trying to do anything with China myself in maybe it was during COVID. So it was like 2020. Like I was still talking to China in the very beginning of 2021. And then we just said, you know what? Let's wait 5 years, possibly even 15 years, put it on pause. Yeah, for us, we were working with Chinese. We never took in any LP capital from China, but we were working on a few things that by early 2021, we decided just to hit pause. So we're probably part, like a lot of people that said, a lot of people are saying, let's wait 5 years. And then some people said, let's wait 15 years. So I'm really curious to hear from you. I mean, obviously, Microsoft still has 10% of the revenue. Tesla's got one of their four big factories there and doing a lot of successful business. What are you doing specifically yourself?
I support a lot of SMEs in their China work. So do a lot of manufacturing agreements, supporting manufacturing industry there. And on the PE side, in 2022, I did a number of deals where that were consolidating operations around supply chains. And so companies that specialized in supply chain operation oversight. There was a PE firm I was working with in particular that was specializing in bringing those in and owning the supply chain operations, basically supply chain management, supply chain support, anything like that. And it wasn't just in China; they were reflecting the greater trend of China plus one or China plus wherever. And so I had deals that involved Malaysia, China plus Taiwan, Malaysia, Singapore, and Mexico. And so I saw those deals reflecting the greater trend of China's still important. We need to have operations there. If we have brick and mortar operations, what else can you do other than try to diversify the risk a bit? So that's
And does this mean like what's the nationality of your client? Who are you representing in these cases?
US, Japanese, and European. So
Okay, so US, Japanese, European companies.
Western companies with interest in China, some kind of interest in China.
Okay, so these guys have manufacturing facilities in China, and now they want to secure and kind of vertically integrate to own and operate more supply chain to not.
Typically they have partners in China. They don't usually own the real estate or the factories, although I did work with one company, a fairly well-known US manufacturer that owned a factory in China, but that was because they wanted in litigation. They had a competitor that was infringing. They sued them in China. They won in China, and as part of the settlement, they got the factory. And I was helping them on a loan restructuring, actually, because they wanted to build out more plant in China, but the local government would not give them more real estate, so they were having to build up rather than out.
Oh my goodness, that's pretty interesting. I mean, I can't imagine being successful in a province without the support of the local government in, like municipal sovereign wealth funds and economic free trade zones and all that kind of jazz. That's amazing. It's interesting to see the intellectual property and adjudication of law evolving in China. I mean, tell me if you've heard this joke before. Do you know what copyright means in Chinese?
No.
Right to copy. That's what they just that's my right to copy that.
I love it.
But as you have like the VC by like 2016, there was like too many VCs chasing too few deals. It was like every fund had like SOE plus local sub fund and all that, just going crazy to overnight catch up to the US. It's actually the only place I've ever seen. Everyone wants the Silicon Valley in their patch of the world, Park City, Utah, whatever. But it's entrepreneurs are everywhere. It's easy overnight to drop money on people that are dying to be a VC or move to, get out of Silicon Valley, get out of New York. But what it's hard to get is the big balance sheet buyers that create that spiral, that the, Cisco, VMware, Facebook, Amazon, Google, Adobe, they're all right in the Silicon Valley. So the buyers are there. And so you get this spiral of like company spins out, gets acquired. The buyers know about it because our kids play soccer or lacrosse together, whereas China has it. So they've got Baidu, Tencent, Huawei. It's a limitless number of big balance sheet buyers, plus everyone else manufactures their VC system overnight. So they really do have a Silicon Valley, and those guys care about the law. They want intellectual property protection, and so copyright, all that stuff is evolved. That's amazing to hear that a Western company succeeded.
Absolutely.
Against that,
and it's a black eye.
crazy.
It's they want the legitimacy. The interesting thing about companies operating in a communist regime is you have endless creativity because people are always trying to figure out, how do I operate within the system, and then how do I operate outside the system? And so I think their neurons are firing twice as fast as ours, because we're always trying to think about the right way, eventualities, and they have to think about, how am I going to deal with this if I run into party issues, and how am I going to run into it if I run into issues with the outside world outside of China. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and the legitimate players really want to be legitimate. I've seen the contracts that are coming from Chinese lawyers are getting better. They understand what they're doing. There's still a lot of sloppy work. There's still a lot of companies in China that don't even bother with lawyers. But I think overall there's, for the last 20 years, there's been a real growth in the legal system, and everyone understanding, at least the ones that care, are understanding that the way to get legitimacy outside of China is to play by the rules. And the ones that are in China that don't play by the rules put a black eye on everyone else that are trying to play by the rules. So it is very interesting. It's really still quite a crapshoot about the type of lawyers that I'm going to be dealing with on the other side, if I'm even dealing with lawyers on the other side.
Whenever I've dealt with lawyers in, Beijing, Nanjing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, these kinds of places, they brag, like beat their chest to like Tarzan about their connections with the government. Like they're like, oh man, I'm in with these guys. Like I did the JV with Tesla. I did the JV with, the maglev guys. Like they're just talking about their access to government is my personal experience. So give us a perspective for those that are not as deeply involved as you are. When did things get worse? And what kind of dealings cross-border with mainland China or even Hong Kong started to stop? And then what is continuing to happen now? Like what positive business is actually happening? I kind of get the impression, like speaking to some people, like when Trump was raising tariffs, these guys were like, we don't care. If you want to make your people pay more for their toothbrush, go at it. It's going to be very hard to stop making your toothbrush here. Like they seem like they just didn't care.
Yeah, I think it does. There's some truth to that, because Chinese government and the manufacturers know that we're still very dependent. The West is still very dependent on China. It's the world's manufacturing hub. I sensed some nervousness even before COVID. As Trump started to roll out the tariffs and talk, even during the election cycle when it looked like he was going to be elected, people were asking questions and saying, "What is this going to change for the marketplace? Is it really going to be harder to do business? Is the U.S. really going to decouple it? And how much leverage are we going to have?" Because the Chinese government has learned to use WTO to its advantage, and so there are, I'd say probably 2017 is when things started getting more complicated. The Xi Jinping risk, the risk where he, as head of the Communist Party, Communist Party secretary, when he really started to flex his muscle, and we saw, ongoing corruption campaigns and people who we thought were untouchable finally, being pulled into the system, whether they liked it or not, that started to make people pause. But I think really COVID was probably the exclamation point for many people. When we had shipping costs go up 5, 6, 7, 10x, and we had delays, and we saw how quickly the government could just shut down China as a factory. That caused people to think, well, if I can pass on cost to my customers, fine, but if I can't get people into the country, if my people are, we already had exit bans for potential for any kind of economic issue, could have resulted in any foreigner getting held in China. So we knew about those risks, but adding these COVID risks on top of it, and then everyone's been holding their breath. I mean, even now, we're still dealing with the ramifications of what did COVID do to China, and we thought there would be more stimulus within the economy in China. We've seen the property sector fall. And so a lot of people are saying, okay, it looks like the Communist Party is really not going to continue printing money. It's not going to bail out all of the industries like they would have done in the early 2000s, in the 2010s, where China's rise was inevitable. I think that everyone is a lot more sanguine now about the realities within China, and so it's hard. I've seen this reflected in the lack of PE and VC deals that have come to my desk this year in 2022. But what I have seen is a retooling of relationships with China. So I said I worked with SMEs, and this matters because, as you said, you and I were talking before, I think we started recording, that the VCs are supporting SMEs, right? We see them grow, supporting them. The ones that have creative ideas, I think, even if the Chinese economy continues to crater, as we've seen it happen this year, there are still going to be opportunities, and those opportunities, I've seen this in due diligence, especially. So let's say, the PE deals I was working on last year, I'd say I was cleaning up the Wild West heyday of the early to mid 2000s, right? All of the deals, the companies had changed hands maybe once or twice between parents. So these are parent companies in the U.S. with Chinese subsidiaries. And I was shocked at some of the things I was seeing in due diligence, right? Everybody in the early days, there's a right way to go into China, there's a wrong way to go into China, and most everyone went in the wrong way, going in with a representative office that only had a very limited scope of what it could do there, and then they just exploded operations and never bothered to really to set up as a real entity in China. That wasn't a problem then. It's a problem now when you're doing due diligence, and I'm on the buyer side doing diligence and seeing what people have been hiding. So that was a very interesting. 2022 was a very interesting window into that part of the world, and you and I talked about the supply chain consolidation and companies that really understand and have the resources to monitor supply chains as they're in China, as you have personnel in Taiwan, Malaysia, Vietnam to support those. And so this year, the trend that I've been seeing that's most interesting to me is companies that have a vested interest in China. Maybe they have an established joint venture. Maybe they just had a key manufacturing relationship. And because China is hurting so much, and U.S. companies are hurting as well, there's been a serious reevaluation of the relationships. A lot of clients that I've been working with have decided the China risk is too much. We don't want a joint venture in China anymore. We need to get out. And I'd say that was happening already in the late teens. But everyone kind of paused. I felt like took in a deep breath during COVID and the last year. And now, as we're looming, 2024 is looming, we're looking at cleaning up balance sheets, cleaning up assets. There's been a lot of non-compliance. I have a particular client that just can't get decent financial statements from their China JV partner, and because their accounting is not done the same way as ours, which means that their auditors won't give them a clean bill of health. And so it's become that much of a risk that we have to completely pull out of the JV one way or another. And that takes time. It's not an easy process to unwind a JV in China, because the Chinese don't want to let you go. Your Chinese partners don't want to let you go. The government doesn't want to let you out. And so there's no incentive to speed that process along. And so, but they don't want to get out of China entirely. They recognize that they have partners in China. They still need those relationships, and companies that are selling into China. I have great clients in the U.S., very successful clients that the China market has stagnated a bit, but they're still very bullish on the ability of the Chinese and the willingness of Chinese to buy good products designed in the West and even manufactured in the West. And so I'm retooling those relationships now for either a distributor relationship or either hopefully an exclusive distributor relationship if it's a good partner. But I've also seen it come the other way, where I have Chinese manufacturers that need to sell product and they want to sign up dedicated distributors, but they're not willing to give country exclusivity. So my world the last couple of months has been wrestling a lot with Chinese manufacturers with great products, with fantastic products that we don't even have in the marketplace in the US. But they aren't willing to give exclusivity to my clients, which makes it difficult for my clients to make great investments in these products, because these are not small widgets. These products are tens of thousands of dollars, right? These are fairly unique products, and so we're just running into a lot of interesting wrinkles as we're finding we have to educate the Chinese about the U.S. market. I find that Chinese manufacturers don't really have a desire to build a brand. They don't see brands the same way we do. For them, the brand is just an ancillary part of a great product, and they just want to sell product. Whereas in the US, we want to build a brand because we understand that when we're turning around and selling, that intangible value of the brand is significant. It can even be better, more valuable
Of
than the
course.
products that are being sold.
Right. Are you seeing Chinese setting up manufacturing facilities in places like Mexico?
Yes,
That like they're preparing to not get caught in the headlights. They're
absolutely.
What are you
Absolutely.
seeing there?
I was in Mexico twice last year, and I asked everyone I talked to, government officials, other lawyers, accountants, said, what's happening in China? They said the Chinese, just like anywhere else, the Chinese are everywhere. They're setting up entities, they're buying real estate, they're building factories. And the interesting thing about the difference in Mexico, they have the maquilador manufacturing method, which is we'll give you the land, we'll give you a vanilla box, you bring everything else. You bring the PPE, and you train the people. The China model that Mexico hasn't figured out how to crack yet, but they know they need to crack it, is we are your sourcing agent. We'll do everything for you. And so US companies haven't made a wholesale switch to Mexico yet because a lot of US companies are just buying product and turning around and selling it in the US. They're not really engaging too much. They may have a little bit of input on product changes, but they don't own the PPE. They don't own the factory. They're not the ones with the in-house knowledge. And so the Chinese are going to be bringing that to Latin America, particularly to Mexico, because of the USMCA and the advantages that we have in doing trade with Mexico because of that new NAFTA 2.0 Act. It is definitely happening. There are a lot of Chinese there, and the Mexicans are running into the same issues with the Chinese that you get dealing with Chinese all over the world. It's a different way of doing business. You have language barriers, and you have just a different way of doing business. But I think if the Mexicans business community can crack it faster than the Chinese can get in and get set up, then it will be a great opportunity for Mexican companies that really are interested in setting up sourcing agent models rather than dealing with relying on the maquilador model.
When Chinese set up a manufacturing facility in Mexico, don't they bring their own people?
They will bring their own people. Absolutely.
Right. So it's not necessarily like all jobs for Mexicans. At some point there are, but my understanding was that it's China operating from Mexico.
Right.
And what about the expression of a signed contract is just a step in a path to an ongoing discussion?
Yeah.
Is that have we seen them just adopt more of a Western view of we signed a contract, don't try and move all the economics to the Chinese side after having shared economics in a written agreement? Is that changing?
It's not changing. I see the same thing.
That is not changing.
The written contract is the stepping stone to the final relationship, right?
Right.
You said it exactly right. It's
the stepping stone. That's what people say.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's a little confusing. It's frustrating. I found it frustrating.
Absolutely.
I'm almost feel lucky that it didn't go through. I mean, we had an agreement for a large fund to create JVs. So we fund Uber. We're going to create Uber China, so there would be no Didi, and then Uber owns half. And then they said, small detail, that whole management fee and carry, it's all ours. And I said, and why would I do this? And they were saying for the prestige or something like that. And so that was I wasn't willing to go through any further stepping stones, myself. But, it's a wonderful place. I think the next time I go to China, it'll be with my family as a tourist. But it's exciting to hear what deals are happening now. And, maybe I'd love to hear some more stories from you. Have you come back and talk about what's getting done in 2023. It's
Sure.
difficult for a full decoupling, and the politicians will do what they do, and business people at some point you carry on. And the Chinese are not only in China, as we discussed with Mexico. It's an everywhere presence.
And I'll tell you about at that when we talk next. I could probably speak more publicly about a Chinese client I'm working with is doing some very interesting things. I consider quite innovative in the trade. It's trading cards and other collectible assets.
Okay.
And they've just been operating in China. And now they're coming to the U.S. I sent them a proposal just a week ago, to help them do a significant amount of legal work, and they're taking it very seriously. They're going to be bringing people here. They want to do it the right way, and it's actually quite refreshing to be working with a Chinese company that has a good model, has a budget, and understands, I think understands really how to build a brand. So I think this is probably Chinese companies 2.0 is really understanding the importance of building brands as they expand out of China.
Interesting. Well, Jonathan, thanks so much. And let's chat in a few months and give ourselves a little more time for the next one.
Perfect.
Thanks so much.
Thanks,
Okay.
Andy.
Talk to you soon. Bye for now.